Hazel. Ah, she was a woman to take your hat off to, a midwife of great skill, one of those who brought children into the world solely with the wisdom she inherited from her mother, who in turn learned from her grandmother. They said in the region that Hazel Smith's hands were blessed, that she had never lost a laboring mother or a baby when called in time. She knew every herb of the desert by smell, by the shape of the leaf, by the bitter or sweet taste. She knew which was good for fever, which stopped bleeding, which brought down a girl's delayed period, which healed wounds that didn't heal with pharmacy medicine. Our house was simple, adobe, low roof, beaten earth floor, but it had a huge backyard where my mother cultivated her medicinal herbs. I grew up there, among the rosemary, the rue, the lemongrass, the fennel, the basil. Since I was tiny, around 7 years old, I already helped her harvest, dry, and prepare the remedies. While other girls my age played with dolls, I learned the difference between the leaf that cures and the one that kills, between the root that lowers fever and the one that induces vomiting. Margaret. My mother always said while she macerated some herb in the wooden mortar my father had made for her, "Pay attention to what I'm doing. One day you're going to need this." And I paid attention with that curiosity of a child who doesn't quite understand the importance of what she's learning, but absorbs everything like a sponge. I learned to recognize each plant, not just by appearance, but by smell, by texture, by the time of year it bloomed best. I learned that some should only be harvested at the full moon, others at the waning moon, that some work better fresh, others need to be dried in the shade. One of my mother's specialties was precisely burns. Back then, with wood stoves, kerosene lamps, bonfires for making soap or roasting coffee, accidents were common. Now and then, someone would arrive desperate, with singed skin, looking for help. I remember like it was today the first time I saw my mother treat a severe burn. I must have been about 8 years old. They brought a man who had fallen into a vat of boiling molasses. Half his body looked like raw meat, truly raw flesh. The smell was horrible, and the screams of pain even more so. My mother wasn't shaken. She told everyone to leave the room, except me. "Stay here and pay attention, because one day you might need to do this," she said with that calm that only someone who has seen everything in life possesses. I saw her clean the wounds with an infusion of mesquite bark and sage leaves. Then she applied a thick paste made of aloe vera, grated prickly pear, jojoba oil, and other herbs she had gathered at dawn with the dew still on them. On top, banana leaves or broad corn husks to keep it moist and cool. The man, who arrived almost dying, walked out after 3 weeks of treatment. He was left with scars, of course, but he saved his life and his limbs, which the town doctor had said would need to be amputated. School was a luxury I barely knew. I learned to read and write with a teacher who came to give private lessons at home once a week, paid with chickens and eggs my mother offered in exchange. But my true education was there, in the herbal garden, accompanying my mother in births, treatments, and blessings. Knowledge that doesn't come in any book, that is only learned by doing, seeing, touching, smelling. At 16, I was already known in the region as the midwife's daughter, and they already called me to help when my mother was busy with another case. It was around this time I met James, my first husband. He appeared at our house one day, bringing his younger sister, who was in complicated labor. He was 26, handsome in a rough way, worked with cattle on a nearby ranch. He looked at me in a way that made me blush to the roots of my hair. After that day, he started showing up frequently, always with some excuse. He had a headache and needed a remedy. He had hurt his finger and wanted a bandage. He brought a chicken as a gift, a pumpkin from the field, a piece of honeycomb. My father didn't like him. He said he had the eyes of a snake, the kind you don't trust. But I, a fool, was enchanted. At that age, we confused desire with love, attention with true care. We married in less than 6 months of dating, a simple ceremony at the Church of St. Joseph, right there in Sedona. I moved to his house, a shack even simpler than my parents', at the back of the ranch where he worked. It was there I met the real James. The charm lasted less than the honeymoon. In the first month, the screaming started. In the second, the shoving. In the third, the first slap across the face. I tried to go back to my parents' house, But my father, with that old mentality, said a married woman only leaves home as a widow. My mother, more sensitive, gave me herbs to hide in his food to calm his nerves. It worked for a few days, then everything returned. The drinking made things worse. On weekends, when he got his pay, he spent half at the saloon before getting home. And then, God forbid and protect me, it was praying for him to pass out drunk before finding me. 3 years I lived in this hell. 3 years of constant fear, of bruises hidden under long sleeves, of flimsy excuses for indiscreet questions about black eyes or a split lip. I never got pregnant during that time, and today I thank God for that. What fate would a child born in that environment have? My mother said it was because I secretly drank the rue tea she taught me, but I really think it was divine protection. The end of this marriage came tragically, but I confess it brought relief. On a night of heavy drinking, riding back from the bar on his horse, James fell into a ravine. Horse and rider rolled down the embankment. The animal survived with a few scratches. My husband didn't. He broke his neck in the fall. When they came to give me the news, I felt a mixture of shock and liberation that gives me a guilty conscience to this day. I don't wish evil on anyone, but that night I slept in peace for the first time in 3 years. It is a heavy, complex emotion to process, but let's be honest, sometimes survival feels a lot like relief. This tragic twist of fate didn't just end a nightmare. It cleared the path for Margaret to return to her roots, mastering the very skills that will save her life years down the road. I went back to my parents' house, now as a respected widow and not a runaway wife. I resumed learning with my mother, who continued teaching me everything she knew about medicinal herbs, births, cures. Her knowledge seemed endless. Every plant, every root, every tree bark had a purpose, a right way to be prepared, a right time to be gathered. Everything in nature has its time and place, Margaret, she always said. The same plant that cures can kill if used at the wrong time or in the wrong way. 2 years after returning to my parents' house, I met Robert. He was the owner of a small general store in town, a widower, 20 years older than me, with a grown son who lived in Phoenix. It wasn't love at first sight like with James. It was something that grew slowly, based on mutual respect and affinity. He came to buy medicinal herbs from my mother to resell in the store, and we always talked a little. One day he invited me for coffee in the plaza, then to Sunday Mass, then to have lunch at his house. Robert was the opposite of James in everything. Gentle, polite, hardworking. He never raised his voice at me, much less his hand. When he asked me to marry him 6 months later, I was afraid. The first marriage had left scars on my soul deeper than any burn. But my mother, wise as always, said, "Daughter, not every man is the same. This one has the look of a good person. Give him a chance, and yourself too." We married on a Sunday morning, in the same church where I had married James years before. The ceremony was small but beautiful. Robert had saved up to throw a modest party, with cake, soda, and even a country band playing fiddle for us to dance. It was the first time I felt truly happy in many years, as if a weight had been lifted from my shoulders. I moved into his house, a simple 2-story, but well-kept, behind the store. There we started our life together. In the first months, I continued helping my mother with births and treatments, but gradually I got more involved with the business. I had a knack for it, I discovered. I knew how to deal with customers, negotiate with suppliers, keep the accounts up to date. Robert jokingly said I was born to be a merchant, not a healer. 1 year after the wedding, I got pregnant. At 23, after thinking I would never be a mother, I felt that life growing inside me. The pregnancy was smooth, without complications. Sarah was born on a hot December night, pulled by her own grandmother's hands. My mother insisted on being the midwife, even though her health was already fragile. "This girl is going to be special," she said as she cleaned the blood and fluids from the newborn. "She will carry the family name with honor." Sarah's arrival changed everything. Suddenly, that little store seemed too small for our dreams. We wanted to give our daughter what we didn't have: complete education, comfort, opportunities. Robert, who was always cautious with money, started to take more risks. He expanded the store, diversified the products, bought a neighboring lot to build a larger warehouse. I helped with everything, always with little Sarah nearby, in a basket between sacks of beans and rice. Little by little, year after year, the business grew. From the small neighborhood grocery, we evolved into a market, then into a medium-sized supermarket. When Sarah was 10, we already had 3 stores in Sedona. Robert had a head for business, and I complemented it with my way of dealing with people. He took care of the numbers. I took care of relationships. He thought about immediate profit. I about long-term growth. We balanced each other perfectly. With the money coming in, we started investing in land. The Arizona high country was always good land for those who know how to work it. We first bought a small ranch on the outskirts of town, where we planted vegetables to supply our own stores. Then a larger ranch, where we raised cattle and planted corn, beans, squash. Over time, we became a reference in local commerce. Miller's markets, as they became known, were synonymous with quality and fair prices. Sarah grew up in this environment of work and prosperity. Since she was little, she accompanied her father in the stores, helped me check merchandise, learned to do math even before starting school. Unlike me, she had a complete formal education. Robert insisted. "My daughter is going to be a doctor," he said with pride when she brought home good grades. And she was. She graduated in business administration at Arizona State University in Tempe. She returned to Sedona, ready to modernize the family businesses. Life was going well, prosperous, calm. I divided my time between the markets and the herbal knowledge I inherited from my mother, who had already departed to the other side when Sarah was 15. I didn't do births anymore. Times had changed. Now there was a hospital and doctors in town, but I continued preparing natural remedies. I kept a little corner in the back of the house, full of medicinal herbs, and attended to those who sought me out. I didn't charge. It was more a community service, a way to honor my mother's legacy. It was when Sarah turned 36 that Robert began to get sick. First, it was small things: tiredness, joint pain, lack of appetite. We thought it was just age arriving. He was already 75 after all, but the symptoms got worse. Tests revealed pancreatic cancer, already in an advanced stage. A matter of months, the doctor said, with that coldness of someone who has given this news hundreds of times. I tried everything. I searched my herbal knowledge for something that could at least alleviate his suffering. I prepared teas, poultices, baths. They worked for a while, took away a bit of the pain, gave a few hours of peaceful sleep, but the cancer continued its relentless work, consuming my husband from the inside. He wasted away, little by little, losing weight, losing strength, but never his good humor and dignity. On a Sunday afternoon, sitting on the porch, watching the sunset tinge the red rocks of Sedona with gold, Robert held my hand with surprising strength for someone so